G'day, listeners. You are listening to the Natives Reservoir podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today ANA National Governor MK Grant and Brisbane Governor Trent will be joining me to discuss the ANA in terms of its structure. How are you going, guys?
Good.
Yeah, very well, thank you. How are you, Michael?
Yeah, look, I just finished training. I was leading training for the ANA Rangers here in Victoria, so that was nice. We did a few different things, a bit of cardio warm-up, some body conditioning, so a bit of forearm conditioning, thigh conditioning.
Very good.
The kicks and, all sorts of different, mostly martial arts drills today. But yeah, that's something people can get involved with if they join up, right?
Yep, it is good fun.
Yeah, and we've even got some camps planned in the not too distant future. So I think if people apply soon, they could even be in time for some pretty interesting stuff. But we won't release too many details around that.
Good marketing.
Anyway, do we want to jump into things?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Well, first thing we've got is a listener comment from the last show, which was physical community. And Ian Bentley, 1837, says, what is the opinion of the association on the greater Anglo-Celtic community and making a political union from it? Kanzuk, ? Do you want to start us off on that one, Grant?
We actually did a podcast, crikey, it was a few months ago now. And
I think it might have been it would have been March for Empire Day.
Yeah, that's right. It was in March. And there was a bit more of a nuanced discussion on this topic essentially in there. And I think the view is, of the ANA at least, we're quite happy enough with our constitutional framework, our national sovereignty and independence, and are not interested in politically surrendering that to anyone else, though there might be merit in, increased relations with these other countries, assuming they also take the yoke off their backs and return to their own unique national heritage. But yeah, I think as it stands, definitely contemporary, absolutely not. And even in the post-globalist future, I still don't think we would be in favour of a political union. I guess it depends how you define that. But we did do more of a nuanced discussion on the Empire Day podcast on this. But as a general thing, no. Of course, we would be friends and allies and trade partners and all the rest of it, but not a truly integrated element of a pan-national quasi-empire. I don't know if Trent, have you got anything to add to that?
We're trying to go away from globalism. That seems like a step in the wrong direction, especially under the conditions that we're living in now. But you never know. And as Matt said, definitely people that we want to have strong ties to and be allied with, but not too close, I don't believe.
Yeah, look, I've got a bit more of a positive spin on it. I mean, we've got to annex New Zealand first. So, no, but in all seriousness, I mean, when you think about it, like one reason that New Zealand didn't join Federation is that they felt that they were too far away and that they had separate geopolitical and economic interests to Australia. And if you think about, they're right next door to us compared to Canada and Great Britain, there's always that kind of tyranny of distance that makes it difficult to have joint policies. Even when you look at the quote unquote third empire period of the British Empire, British foreign policy was not always entirely in line with, say, where Canadian foreign policy wanted to be, and so on. Especially, we did the National Life and Character podcast, and one of the things there was that the British had different concerns to the the different colonies in regards to race and so on. Now that we're all more kind of united on that, I think broadly we do. I mean, we share so many institutions and a lot of cultural roots, obviously going back to the British Isles. So, yeah, I think we can be closely aligned. Maybe even have some sort of civilizational framework in place where we kind of share ideas on a civilizational level and preferential trade partners. It kind of really depends a lot on what happens. Even in the Empire Day podcast, the Brits were saying, that's so far down the track. So it's not even just on our end. Yeah. If you want to know more, listen to the Empire Day podcast. All right. That was the only comment last time. So let's move on to the poem. This is an Australian advertisement by Henry Lawson. We want the man who will lead the van, the man who will pioneer. We have no use for the gentleman or the cheating cheapjack here. We have no room for the men who shirk the sweat of the brow, condemn the men who are frightened to look for work and funk when it looks for them. We'll honour the man who can't afford to wait for a job that suits, but sticks a swag on his shoulders broad and his feet in blucher boots, and tramps away o'er the ridges far and over the burning sand to look for work where the stations are in the lonely western land. He'll brave the drought and he'll brave the rain and fight his sorrows down, and help to garden the inland plain and build the inland town. And he'll be found in the coming years with a heart as firm and stout, an honoured man with the pioneers who lead the people out. So that was an Australian advertisement by Henry Lawson.
Good energy, good atmosphere, good character. An honoured man with the pioneers who will lead the people out. Speaks very much to the attitude we try to cultivate in the A&A. Of course, we always had that old view of every man a pillar in the community, and this poem has always been very dear to me. Just to stand up regardless of the conditions and chase and secure a destiny. What do you think, Trent?
Yeah, that one really spoke to me about the just perseverance in poor conditions, and that's a big element of what the ANA is. So that's the first time I've heard that one. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, same for me. First time I've heard that one. Even from the first line, you can kind of see the relevance to us now. We want the man who will lead the van. So literally the vanguardist, the pioneers. No room for the men who shirk. So yeah, it is a lot of work to build up a community, to build up an institution. And we condemn those men who are frightened to look for work, just funk around and don't do anything. Sit on Twitter and shit post and complain. Look, yeah, I have no problem with people who shit post and do something, but if you just shit post, that's a problem.
Agree. And it's like the other expression, to wait for a job that suits, it's like wait for someone else to do all the hard work, and then you can just ride in on the coattails and enjoy the labours of someone else's efforts. Very real. But I enjoy that one. Shout out to Lawson. It
is very Lawson in that it's, focusing on not the gentleman. We have no use for the gentleman. But he's looking at that working class, the guy who sticks a swag on his shoulders broad, his feet in the boots, and tramps away over the ridges far and over the burning sand to look for work where the stations are in the lonely western land. I recommend that people read a fair bit of Lawson poetry and look at his life. It's quite a sad life, really. Famously, he committed suicide, I believe, on the beach. Shot himself, had a lot of problems with alcohol. So we don't necessarily want to over-romanticize the worker. There's a lot of bad stuff there, and obviously that happened to Lawson himself. But kind of that tortured artist type. I suppose.
Had a hard life. But he did a lot of good writing, and I think Percy Stevenson obviously was a fan of him because his writing was so raw and so Australian, offensively Australian, essentially. Like he didn't bother trying to appease, I suppose, foreign sentimentality about how storytelling should be done. It was just very, very raw and very real Australian experience, I think. So, but yeah, big fan. But that's okay. We can move on from the poetry into the guts of what we wanted to talk about, which is our organisational model and structure and all the rest of it.
Yeah, this is always a good topic to cover and remind people of. And as people come into the scene, they might not have heard it. It's something you've talked about a fair bit, Grant. So I've definitely heard some talks on this before, but they may not be out there in the public realm so much. So perhaps why don't you start us off with, why the ANA model and all of that stuff?
Yeah, so I think what we're doing is extremely unique, arguably unique in the world. In terms of, the next nearest comparison to the way we do things is very far and few between. Our organisation, I suppose, before you really get into discussing the model and the way we do things and why we do them the way we do them, in that kind of framework, it's important to understand, obviously, our expectations for the future. So people have varying opinions about the future of the continent of Australia and the Commonwealth government and the demographic changes going on in the country, the cultural changes, the economic changes. And obviously, I think for most young people at least, there's a shared view of dire existential crisis for the country. But the timeline in which you expect things to get worse and worse is quite significant in the way you plan and respond to the situation. So I suppose we've done historical podcasts talking about what we call Brazilification, which is this long process through which you go from being a first world, high status, high human development civilization like Australia has been, and you decline into a kind of second-rate, corrupt, disunified country, which is very difficult to effectively govern, has very low amounts of social capital, trust, identity, and all the rest of it. So you become something like Brazil or Argentina or Uruguay. So we think, based on the combined effects of everything that's going on, the kind and types of people being brought into this country and the volume of which they're being brought in, the relevant cultural and economic decline is likely to lead to us becoming essentially like Brazil, in the next 40, 50 years. And so with that in mind, our method of organising is geared towards how to best deal with that. Let's assume the worst is going to happen, obviously hope for the best and do the best we can to avert that fate. But we're also not designed to expect some kind of imminent collapse of law and order and an imminent collapse of society. A lot of people get quite obsessed with the South Africa trajectory. And I guess the difference is in this country, we're not importing tens of millions of Africans. There is definitely a large number of Africans that have been brought into this country, but in the main, the demographic shifts principally Indian, South Asian, Chinese, and so with that kind of demographic trajectory, we're not likely to become South Africa. We're likely to become essentially an Asian country, of some kind of mixed bag of loyalties, because obviously Indians and Chinese and other South Asian ethnic groups have their own conflicts, and their lack of cohesion will lead to essentially the fracturing of Australia down those different ethnic lines. But there'll still be some kind of framework which is far more second world country than third world, like South Africa. So if that is your expectation for the future, then that is when you kind of look at strategic planning to deal with that kind of arrangement. And so we're looking at the ANA not merely as a political group or a group that's designed to achieve political change, but to be the foundational institution from which future generations of Australians will be able to rely upon for support, not only political advocacy, but also their economic welfare, their community, their legal resources, their source of strength and security. And our model of organising in the way we manage our branch constitutions, the way we manage our elections, our dispute resolution processes, our accounting for finances, and all the rest of our intricacies that we'll get into in a little bit, are in a way a way of learning the art of governance. And essentially, in the long-term view of things, the ANA as an institution may end up being the de facto government of the Australian people in the future, if things really declined on an enormous scale.
Yeah, maybe we'll jump in here for a second as well, because that's kind of very much the way I look at things. I look at the ANA as kind of like on the one hand, it's kind of like a lifeboat where we're kind of trying to preserve as many things from the old Australia as we can, and have that continuity even as that sort of greater ship goes down, if you think of it that way. So on the one hand, you've got this kind of lifeboat mentality of we want to take the good things from the old Australian culture, and that is the heritage that we need to carry on. But on the other hand, that lifeboat is going to kind of be at the seat of a new colony, a new Australia. So we're taking these things, but then we're looking at the future, and God willing, we'll be able to maintain political control of the entire continent, and implement remigration and all these sort of more radical policies, I guess you can call them. But we also have to prepare for the worst case as well, which is that we're looking at a continent that has hostile powers, I suppose, controlling large swathes of territory. And so we need to look at a situation where we can have at the very least, a slice of the pie. So I think the victory conditions kind of vary, but, at the very least, we need to survive as a people. And so you can have that kind of lifeboat seed mentality as the worst case while trying to get the best outcome possible. Trent, what do you think?
I'll just put in the future, I think we're headed towards anarcho-tyranny. That's as Sam Francis describes it. So instead of it being like a full-blown Mad Max situation, total breakdown of law and order, it's going to be more like the authorities asking very nicely for the criminals to please hand in their machetes, while you are just bled absolutely dry with tax, surveilled constantly, and just pounded into the ground and not allowed to do anything to improve the situation. But that being said, if there is like some sort of crazy rug pull, and we head into some sort of societal spiral, death spiral, an association like the ANA will still be really useful. Having those connections, having people and a community around you is going to be so much better than not having that. So even though that's not the situation that we're expecting and we're preparing for, I would just like to make the point that it's still something that the ANA could take on.
I think, you touch on a really important point, and it's the other side of this as well is, let's just say we were all completely convinced that total Australian victory and securing the full continent is inevitable. You would still go about it in the same way that we are essentially doing it. From a strategic point of view, if you want to support public advocates, if you want to support campaigns to change policy, to change the electoral sphere, to change the state, you need foundational institutions which have significant resources, capacity, commitment, principles, and you need that kind of model of organizing which is anti-fragile, not inclined to implode over personality disputes, not inclined to be corrupted, not inclined to be basically destroyed. So, we are, on one hand, we are indeed a life raft, but on the other hand, the life raft is the best possible frigate, to attack and sink the enemy when properly equipped. So it's a multifaceted institution with different opportunities, but the foundational strategy is that you need to have sufficient people, you need manpower, you need money, you need people with skills, you need economic opportunities, you need people in high places in industry, law, commerce, the arts. You need to have infrastructure, essentially, in order to wage war, which we are in a war, a civil war, effectively.
A cold civil war.
a cold civil war. Yeah, so, as the old song goes, send lawyers, guns, and money. It's basically that minus the guns. So everything you do until you have infrastructure that can actually support a sustained dynamic battle with the foreign aggressor, the international finance capital, which is currently pillaging this country, moving foreign pawns around on the chessboard as scab labor to flood the country. You can't sustain a battle against that without having foundational infrastructure, which is strong and well resourced, which is what we're achieving and we're building towards in the ANA.
Yeah, no worries. Well, why don't we move on to the next point, which is to go a little bit deeper into why do we have the branch model, the constitutions and so on, like the actual paperwork of financial accounting and so on. But I suppose we'll start with that kind of semi-decentralized, or we could almost call it that kind of distributist principle of the branch model.
I guess the big thing for us is when we reinstituted the ANA almost 10 years ago now, almost, we took the view that, having looked at the past of other nationalist organisations in Australia in the last few decades, so many of them had been destroyed essentially because they were poorly organised. There was no accountability processes. There was no transparency of finances, and they had an inclination to becoming cults of personality. And so that was your single point of failure. If the one hero personality gets knocked off or changes his mind or whatever, the rest of the thing would fry around him. So we took the view of creating a legally enforceable constitution, which meant that our members knew if they put their blood, sweat and tears into the organisation, that their rights as members would be protected and legally enforceable, so that they'd be more comfortable and forthcoming with putting their blood, sweat, tears, money, taking the risk of wearing the ANA brand on their shoulder. And then we also created the constitutional framework just to deal with the natural consequences which flow from getting a group of people into a room. you're always going to get disputes, differences of ideas and personalities and all the rest of it. And so we needed to create a framework where we could deal with disputes, where we could deal with transitions of power and leadership without having to destroy the organization. In many other nationalist organizations around the world, if you want to change the leadership model or the leadership structure, you basically need to destroy the organization. You're essentially going to lose all the money. I mean, it wasn't too long ago we saw the National Justice Party just explode in the US. I don't even know if they've recovered from that.
No, they haven't. Absolutely. That's the example I always go to because I'm not as old in the Australian scene as you are, Grant. So I haven't seen, all the iterations, all the failures of previous models going back to, I don't know, whatever it was, the Dingoes or the
Dingoes,
Sydney stuff.
Lad Society. Shout out to Lad Society. Yeah.
Anyway, but NJP is the real example for me because, it's just so blatantly obvious at how corrupt it turned out, where they branded themselves as a party, but it was set up as like a company effectively, where like all the control was legally invested in the top guys, and then so you get to this point where these guys, the membership realizes, these guys have embezzled the money and fucking like this guy's on holiday. I don't know where he was, in Hawaii or something. He's just using party money for that quote unquote party because it's not an actual party. The other guy's paid off his house using the money. Is like, can you get that back? No, you can't because it's not set up properly, right? So it's actually so important. And it might seem lame and people might be out there thinking, well, actually, I'm a revolutionary and, I don't give a shit about this boring legal stuff and why you engaging with the system. Well, like, do you want your money and your effort stolen? You got to have some accountability.
That's the based option, though, is just to trust the true natural leader of the white race, and he'll do everything right, bro. Just put money in his personal bank account. That'll go fine, I'm sure. Many such cases.
Yeah, well, this time will be different. Okay, Trent, anything you want to say about that?
Well, like right now, I'm very trusting of my ANA brothers, and we could just have someone that it was their personal bank account that they kept the money. But before I joined the organization a couple of years ago and got to know everyone and became part of the crew, there's no way I would have done that. I would have been like, who are these guys? So it's a positive that you can tell the people when you're trying to bring them in, when you're spruiking the ANA, you can say we have all these measures in place to make sure that the leader isn't going to scupper off with all our money and we'll be left high and dry. So yeah, it is a bit boring, but it is really important.
Yeah, and look, even in our branch, we've had personality clashes where people have, kind of harbored kind of resentments against other people and not understood people's, like where people are coming from and that sort of thing. And we have had to use dispute resolution processes. And, through that process of being forced to work through a sort of organized framework, people have had to be really upfront with each other about their complaints. And then they realize, hey, actually, this other person is, they're coming from like a reasonable perspective that I can understand. And I've kind of misjudged their character and that sort of thing. And so it's not, necessarily a tea party where nothing can ever go wrong, but you have the processes in place where if if people do have that clash or they misjudge people, they can't just, they can't just go behind people's backs and do some sort of, coup or, running off with the money or suddenly, I'm the leader, I'm kicking this guy out because I don't like him. It's like you have to go in through the process and actually this other guy is not Hitler. It's not the devil. Is not, well, some people might think Hitler's good. Sorry, that was falling back on a social norm there.
Yeah, I think the other side of it as well is like, the thing is as well is like we take it for granted, but there's countless people out there, even in this country, who not so long ago were involved in other nationalist organizations that got absolutely vaporized and all the money disappeared and all the rest of it. And, they shouldered all the risk of being involved for years. They put their blood, sweat and tears into the thing. And when they watch something that they've dedicated themselves to blow up right in front of them, it's more often than not that they'll never be seen again in the nationalism, because when you get burned by a poorly managed organization, you're just going to think everything else that's ever to appear in nationalism is to be just as retarded and incompetent. And so you'll never want to give it a go again. Like, why bear all that risk? Why be an enemy of the international system if you're going to just get burned by your purported allies anyway? So it's about anti-fragility. The organization needs to endure beyond any individual people. Its money needs to endure and grow. Its capacity and resources need to grow and endure over time. And we need to ensure that that people aren't just burnt out and lost to the cause forever. ANA, we have lost members over the years, but I'm sure they will come back to us in short time, because they realise this is an institution that's going nowhere, and it's larger than any individual personalities. It's just it's a dynamic, unkillable hydra.
Yeah, well, I think the problem is when a branch starts out, there's a lot of work for very few people. And that's something that can burn people out. If you're throwing in all this effort trying to get people going and stuff, as branches build up and you get more guys who are willing and able and keen to contribute, that's when the burden gets spread around a bit more. And there are only so many like hero personalities who are willing to give 100% or 99% and 1% left for collecting Centrelink, right? It's hard to give so much time to nationalism. So, but we can't do it just off those 99%ers who are going to throw all that effort in. There just aren't enough of them to win, I don't think. They can certainly have a big impact, but look, the more guys you get a few people who are I'm going to spend 40% of my time, a few people who say I'm going to spend 60% of my time, the couple who are going to spend, that 90% or 80% or whatever it is, a much larger percentage of time. And the burden gets spread out and, stuff gets done and things get constructed and morale gets boosted. So I think the hardest part is that initial stage. And that's the thing that can kind of burn people out. But those people, I think, do come back as well if they get burnt out in that stage. So
that's right. I think the other thing about our model as well is, I suppose, our meta-political strategy of improving our members means we're also encouraging our members to have careers, have families, have hobbies, have meaning to life that is beyond politics. So that creates a burden for the time that people can commit to political activities as well, because we believe, that having a meaningful life and having satisfaction in life from things that are outside of politics is essentially necessary. It's as necessary as food is. I commonly refer to the analogy of the Roman legions making sure that they're fed before they enter battle, that they're not walking and marching great distances without sufficient sleep, without having a full stomach. In the same way that having an army of unemployed or underemployed NEETs on Centrelink waging war against the system, these guys have very little in life to give them real satisfaction outside of politics. And so often they are marching on an empty stomach, and the fatalities and the casualties would show long before you even got into battle. But then when you would get into battle, you would truly see the losses. So it's a double-ended sword what we have in our model. Obviously, we want to encourage everyone to live a full life that isn't purely politics. But at the same time, that means we are going to sacrifice on some energy, which otherwise may have gone into politics in that short burst of energy before they burnt out. So getting that balance right is always a challenge, but it's a noble battle to be fought. If we want to have a cadre of capable people that can stay in the battle for years and years and years, which is what we need, these men also need to have lives and satisfaction in life that exists outside of politics.
Yeah, no worries. Good. Trent, is there anything you want to add before we move on to talking about, why do we have national policies and that balance between self-governance of branches and national oversight?
No. Let's move on to the national oversight and the self-governance stuff.
Okay.
All right. Grant?
I'll just throw in here. So our philosophy for that is we want to encourage as much self-governance amongst the branches as possible. Obviously, the branches know what's best for them, but at the same time, because we have a shared brand and a shared reputation, there's minimum standards of conduct and activities that we need to make sure is made uniform throughout the country to prevent essentially a runaway branch engaging in conduct that brings the rest of the organisation to risk or disreputation. So our philosophy of national governance is essentially to do the minimum necessary to protect the interests of the branches as a whole, but leaving as much latitude as we can to the branches to undertake their own activities insofar as it doesn't have any adverse impacts on other branches. That's kind of the philosophy. And so our national body is essentially there's a national committee that's constituted of 5 individuals that are elected every year, and every branch gets 1 vote for each candidate. So essentially, it also encourages branches to. It's to prevent the encouragement of branches to engage in like branch stacking activities where they try to bring in as many members as they can to increase their overall vote on the national committee. So it's 1 branch, 1 vote to protect the fairness and balance between the relevant branches. Some branches have more people than others. And so that's, I suppose, at a high level, how the national body works. The national body also deals with disputes that are between branches. If there's disputes between members between branches or branches themselves, and the national body also has its own accounts and financial resources used for some of its own particular activities.
Yeah, you can even think of it in sort of an analogy to a referendum, right? Like for a referendum to pass, you don't need just an absolute majority of voters, but you need a majority of states, which kind of protects states' interests, I suppose. It's kind of like that in the association, right? Like a branch that has more members may have a bit more clout, I suppose, in terms of more people doing stuff and so putting out ideas and so forth. But at the end of the day, when it comes to the votes, like every branch has a single vote for the national body. So
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Trent, do you want to talk about this? What's your perspective as a governor, I guess?
Well, for the general rank and file members, I think a lot of the time they just operate on the branch level, and it's a in real life activity, going to meetings, doing stuff with their branch mates, and then on a yearly basis where we get together for our national convention and come together with the other branches. But just in the general day to day, they're not interacting with them that much. But for the leaders, we're talking to each other all the time. I've got Matt's phone number. I've got Thomas, the Victorian governor's phone number. And if I have a question, if I want some advice or to throw something, bounce something off someone, I can always give them a call, and we're constantly helping each other out, working together. So that's how I see the structure.
Yeah, it's not like every branch is isolated. Like whenever somebody visits
Yes.
from another state, we tend to like put on a dinner at the very least. And I'm very personally grateful to you because earlier in the year I went up to Brisbane and you very graciously allowed me to stay at your place. So those
Yes.
sorts of things, being able to travel to another state and be hosted by a branch, that's a really great thing that is an ideal of our community. I guess a really great example of how.
Yeah, one thing that I would like to see in the future is any ANA man can be like, oh, I've got a job interview in this city or this area, and they can show up in a new place where they don't know anybody, and they can show up to a branch meeting, and now they've got a community of people, a bunch of mates, and they're immediately at home in their new location. That's a big dream for the ANA of mine.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
We've seen that play out already over the years. I mean, we've had lots of members move between different branches for, different work opportunities and all the rest of it. And, you'd speak to any of those guys and it's a very special connection and feeling to know that you've got true friends and loyal men essentially all around the country that you can lean upon to feel at home and have a sense of community wherever you end up.
Yeah, so it is really a national fraternity and not just a local fraternity, even though, obviously 99% of the time you're going to be hanging out with people that are closest to you geographically. But look, is there anything else we want to add before we just briefly talk about peaceful transitions of power in terms of our anti-fragility framework?
Let's get into that, I think.
Yeah. Grant, again, take it away. You're the big man.
Yeah, no worries.
The big fella.
Yeah.
Taking on the Lang mantle.
That's right. Yeah, I am a Lang enjoyer. Look, peaceful transitions of power. Look, I guess we kind of did touch on that a little bit with the NJP stuff, right? But the other side to this as well is, obviously because our branches, every member has a vote every year at the branch AGM to select the new committee to run the branch for the year. That encourages and makes possible transitions of power that are peaceful and don't destroy the branch, which is one good thing. The other good thing as well is it creates, maybe what Lawson would call a democratic atmosphere in which men are not only not afraid to stand up for a position on a branch committee, but they're actually encouraged to stand up for a position on a branch committee. New members of the ANA or old members of the ANA who find new energy and new vitality are encouraged to put their hand up to be involved in a branch committee and help administer a branch for a year and help undertake branch activities and help the national organisation advance its interests. And so it's that process of encouraging new leaders which is going to give the organisation the longevity that it's going to need to keep this fight up for many years. That's the polar opposite to cults of personality, where essentially you get these schizophrenic leaders who are not very keen on having other people put their hand up for leadership or seeing other people build greater influence in the organisation because it threatens their own influence. I mean, you can see it everywhere around the world. It's not a unique problem in political radical organizations, and not even just nationalist ones. It is just a feature of, I suppose, radical groups. And so by our model encouraging new and fresh leaders to put their hands up, it doesn't mean they're always going to win a position. But it creates a good atmosphere of competition, and it also creates a good atmosphere where people can learn the art of influence and learn the art of building themselves as credible future leaders of the organisation. And that spills over into the other spheres of life. Learning the art of leadership at the ANA is essentially an extension of learning human resource management and learning project management, learning all these other skills which are universally valuable out in the real world, in industry and commerce and law or whatever field you want to talk about. A lot of the practical skills that people learn in the ANA, including leadership, lifelong valuable skills. And so I think it's a good feather in our cap to encourage that process and encourage new leaders to get on board and put their energy into something which is important.
Yeah, on that, the new leaders. So this is my first time as governor, and that's because our founding governor Tristan who did a fantastic job as governor. He wanted to step back because he was so busy with his running a business, raising a young family. And so he stepped back, I stepped up, and hopefully in the future, I'll be getting busy with those things, and it'll be my turn to step back and have somebody step in to the role again and take us forward. And having that rotation of people. And as to what Matt said about the useful skills, that is definitely true. I've taken on a management role in my work, and the skills, like the people skills and everything that I have picked up in the ANA have been absolutely invaluable to me in my career.
Yeah, excellent. All right, shall we move on to another very broad topic? So we've talked about our broad structure and framework. What about our meta-political strategy?
I think the starting point for meta-politics is kind of understanding. It's kind of like meta-politics, real politics. There's a few ways of describing it. But the idea is we need to create that foundational strength in the real world and not merely political influence. So creating opportunities for employment, housing, community, friends, family, creating legal support, all of those kind of pillars can create strength from which we can then direct our energy into politics, like actual politics. If we were interested in, and if there was a path to victory through electoral politics, it would only come once the foundational infrastructure is in place and can support any kind of political activity. So, we have this Fabian strategy where instead of, what many people have attempted to do is just get a bunch of rabble together and then run for parliament and just basically die, because it's not as easy as it sounds. We have this view of let's do what Fabius did when Hannibal was in Italy. Let's rally our troops. Let's build our, do like mobile siege warfare where you don't get into a pitched battle with the enemy straight away, because the strategic wins are not in it for you. A kind of art of war strategic analysis tells you that before you really engaged in a no holds barred punch with the international system, you need to have significant institutional resources behind you. And if you can't find those institutional resources somewhere, you need to build them from the ground up, which is what we're doing. It won't be long now until we can really publicly announce and make a big deal out of our national litigation fund. So the ANA has been accumulating legal resources over the last year. We're pleased to say that we do have reasonably competent litigators in the organisation, and we're also building a national litigation fund, with that money being able to go to defend members in the Fair Work Commission or the Federal Court if they're unlawfully dismissed for their political opinion, or alternatively, if they're defamed and treated unfairly by the media or any other kind of public doxing operation, we can vindicate them for the harm caused to their reputation. So, find me another nationalist organisation, perhaps anywhere in the world, with that capacity in-house. I'd be a bit surprised. I think, we're not just talking game here. We're actually building the real resources and institutional infrastructure to protect our members, and then once again act in a true advancement for our cause, without having to fear adverse, ridiculous risks, which most nationalists just dive headlong into. Respect the bravery and the courage, but not a very sensible strategy if you don't have the resources to deal with it.
Yeah, no, excellent. That sort of strategy of building up first and making sure that you've got what you need before you go out and try and achieve something politically is I think very important, and I'm a big believer in that, which is why I'm in the ANA instead of in something else.
I think the other side of it as well is it's like, once we have this foundational infrastructure, which is able to protect membership and protect advocates of our cause, our organisation will suddenly become far more attractive to people who actually have more to lose. Up until this moment, really, nationalist politics is usually only attractive to people who are disenfranchised by the current state of affairs. Like if you're having a great time right now, like you're going on annual holidays to Bali or Europe and you've just bought your 4th investment property, you've probably got no interest in nationalist politics because it's going to lead to adverse impacts to your wallet and self-indulgence. So hence our organisation is ordinarily attractive to people who are essentially young and who are not massive benefactors of the current state of affairs. There are far more people out there which actually might have more money, more skills, more connections, more institutional influence, and they're simply too afraid to get involved in nationalism because of the potential risks to their employment or risks to their reputation. And when we have our legal structure and litigation fund and all the rest of it essentially ready to go and ready to advocate for its members and protect its members, suddenly those far more, what you might call the term elite human capital is thrown around a lot these days, but when you're more attractive to those people because you can actually help them in their time of need and defend them for their political advocacy or even their involvement, suddenly we, as an organisation, are likely to attract a significant influx of members, and particularly more members who have more to lose, I suppose, unlike the ordinary disenfranchised, to which are normally attracted.
Yeah. One thing I might add at this point is I guess a lot of people, not a lot of people, but maybe some people might be thinking, you're talking about metapolitics and sitting back and building all of this stuff. Well, what about right now? Things are getting worse. If I join the ANA, can I still do things? I want to do stuff. Look, what I would say is, there are a lot of people in the ANA who are very actively involved in just politics and not metapolitics, and that can even be activism, or it may be the recent street movements. Like I personally attended the March for Australia, and I thought that was a very good thing. And that in itself, that sort of street activism can have a big metapolitical impact as well. And obviously, I don't want to lay all our cards on the table in terms of what individual members may or may not be doing in all sorts of areas. But people are doing stuff, and we're just, there's something to be said for, putting up the flag and saying, let's rally over here and let's do this stuff, and being very open and, activist about things. But there's also something to be said for moving behind the scenes and, not showing your cards and that sort of thing. And obviously in the ANA, we take the second approach where we're a bit more cautious. We're not so open about what we do. And so that gives the appearance that perhaps we don't do anything. And I would reassure our listeners, we do in fact do things, and we are
fact checked by Patriots. True.
Yeah, like the thing with the ANA is it's kind of a central hub. It's a central institution. We've kind of talked about it, as a seed of a new Australia, or it may get to the point where, if Australia falls apart, the ANA will be like the government for the Australian people within this failed state that previously ran the continent, or whatever that may be. Yes, we function as that central hub, but there are a lot of initiatives that people take. That could be within the ANA. I've talked a lot about the Rangers, and we did our training earlier today, and that's all well and good. But people also meet other people with skills and nationalism through this institution that we have, through this fraternity, and they're able to then go out and do other stuff outside of that, and that could be all sorts of stuff. We rubbish the electoral politics, but some guys are interested in that, and they can get involved in that. And then you're not banned from doing stuff in the ANA until So I will. I just want to put that note out there, because good I think that is a common criticism when we start talking about the Fabian strategy and that sort of thing. We are still, let's say, harassing the enemy and doing actions, right? We're not in full retreat mode, and all that's going on is we're packing the lifeboat and watching the ship sink. No, we are trying to patch the holes, and guys are getting out there and getting involved. But different people will be doing different things depending on their talents, depending on their interests, and
that's right. And look, it's all risk-based approach as well. Like wherever something has a credible value proposition, which is worth taking the relevant risks, like ANA is fully on board. The other side of it as well, I thought worth mentioning is one comment you said about how, we're a bit more behind the scenes. And look, that is true in the current state of affairs, but I would say that is not the intention to remain the permanent state of affairs. And as our resources, which have been growing quite significantly in recent time, continues to reach its zenith over the next couple of years, I think you're going to see a lot more of the ANA occupying, I suppose, the not necessarily headlines themselves, but the ANA will be occupying a much larger role in nationalist advocacy in this country. We are simply just getting prepared for the relevant risks that and costs that will entail to ensure that we can actually continue that struggle for years, and with sustained increasing pressure, instead of just getting thrown in prison or getting destroyed quickly into the fire. But Trent, did you have anything you wanted to add to this topic?
Nothing to add, but I am really looking forward to moving into the next stage and pumping up the ANA, being out there shouting it from the rooftops.
Yeah, right. I think the only thing left in this section that we had planned was to talk a bit about the plans for establishing an intentional community and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, look, there's a lot of people that are excited about all intentional community projects that happen around the world. I mean, it happens somewhat in a smaller scale on our branch level, depending where you are, of course. Like people in Melbourne, by virtue of traffic, although they may only be mere kilometres away, are in fact like an hour away from each other, which is crazy. But anyway, the view of having people live very closely geographically is something that's very attractive to us. We do have a bit of interest in our organisation about pursuing intentional community projects in the future. I mean, we do have, we've got licensed builders and tradesmen, people competent in project management and planning law and all the rest of it. So it's definitely within our grasp, within the years to come, to really look at true opportunities for building and land development and essentially creating geographically distinct ANA kind of member and family onlys communities. So that's another thing we're quite interested in, and the capacity to do that is continuously growing in the organisation.
Yeah, so for those people who are interested in that, I mean, you can't really build a community just out of nothing. You've got to be involved with something and meet people that you can trust, and so.
I've got to chime in here because I know some people hear that and they go like, "Oh, it's a cult. This will not be like a commune with a shared kitchen and whatever you might be imagining. It will be like a town, with separate houses and
property rights,
not a commune."
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely not going to be a commune, guys.
Yeah. I mean, like we and the other thing, and that honestly, and just on basic legality alone, like communes are almost impossible in Australia. Like you look at examples like Return to the Land in the US, and their zoning and planning regulations in some states are just crazy what you can get away with over there. Where in Australia, the planning constraints to build like multiple dwellings on the same block of land requires such significant investment and approvals and all the rest of it. Something like a commune, it simply just couldn't be legally replicated in this country. So when we talk about it, we are actually talking about like essentially a nativist subdivision where there's individual deposited plan, Torrens title, house lots and commercial lots and road upgrades and sewer infrastructure and all the rest of it. So obviously quite an expensive operation, but yes, it would effectively be like building a town rather than a tent campus with a shared kitchen.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that because didn't want the listeners to think we were all moving to Byron Bay and on a big plot of land.
We're just moving to the beach, bro. We're gonna surfing nationalism is on. But yeah,
stealth camping, stealth camp town. We just hide in the bushes. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the last bit then. Why get involved? And I mean, some of it's kind of implicit in what we've already said, but is there anything we kind of want to, wrap up with in terms of why should people get involved in the ANA, in particular the ANA structure? Again, I'll pass to you, Grant.
Yeah, okay, sure, yeah, no worries. Well, final plea to the listener, the infrastructure that's being built in the ANA is actually critical to the long-term survival of not only a competent nationalist movement, but also to the survival of our children and our nation. Regardless of the direction of the continent at large, the ANA is going to continue to grow, persevere, become more and more capable, strong and competent. And we need all hands on deck to secure essentially that fortified position in the next few years, from which we can then engage in more significant public advocacy and really do the best we can to save our Commonwealth. And if the worst comes to worst, the infrastructure we've built to try and save the Commonwealth becomes the infrastructure that secures the future of our children and our grandchildren. So you literally, there's no sunk cost. Everything you put into the ANA is ultimately going to be to your welfare and the welfare of the nation. However that ends up panning out. But whatever we do, we have to get in and contribute and put our time and energy into the thing and become part of it. Get involved. We've been around for a long time, and a lot of good people have come through our organisation. A lot of people have had positive changes in their life and found good friends, community, opportunities, jobs, careers. There's a lot to get out of the ANA, and we hope you'll join us.
Yeah, for my part, I'd just say, whatever skills you have, whatever you're interested in, there's something you can do in the ANA, even if you don't have any skills. There are things that we can direct you towards, and there are guys who can teach you different things and get you started in a career that's going to be, useful for nationalism, useful for the survival of our people. And we can't, we can't just have a movement where every single guy is an MMA fighter, nationalist activist. Like, we actually have to be able to, move people into all aspects of society in the future, whether that be, a complete parallel breakaway thing if the central government fails, or if we just get our guys in power through the electoral process, just like, say, Trump did. The problem is, do you have the people to staff the different bureaucracies and so on? Well, you have to have experts in all sorts of different areas. So we need to build that cadre of professionals, as well as having the fighters as well. So, Trent, what would you say for this last part?
Oh, there's not much I can add to that. Just the more people we get, the sooner we get them. Like the more we're going to be able to do, and the quicker we're going to be able to do it. So, yeah, visit the website. Think about signing up.
Yeah, it really just is as simple as more men, more money, and more stuff will happen. So get involved. So to wrap up, let us know in the comments what topics you'd like to hear about from us, or if there's a particular topic relating to Australia or the ANA that you would like us to do a show on. Of course, we try and respond to listener comments in our shows. So if you leave a comment, we'll respond to it. If we miss it, I guess you can just point that out, and we'll make sure we get to it in the next one. As always, I'd encourage all our supporters in the audience to make sure you like and subscribe and share our content far and wide. We'd love to share our show with as many good Aussies as possible. And lastly, if you want to reach out, you can find us at ausnatives.org. That's AUSNATIVES.org. That's Grant, Michael. So that's Grant, Michael, and Trent signing out.
Bye.